So as per usual, whenever I make videos pertaining to politics, I just want to put out this quick little disclaimer. I am by no means the most informed person when it comes to political matters. In fact, I'm probably one of the least informed people you will ever find as it pertains to politics. These videos are my effort at bridging the gap between what I should know and what I do know. And I actually view these videos as a collaborative effort where you can help me in the comment section develop a more nuanced perspective of some of the things that we're about to discover throughout this video. Because as someone who's uninformed, it's my obligation in my mind to simply take what I'm seeing at face value in the context of my own ethical and moral boundaries. Bearing that in mind, this first post right here definitely ruffled my feathers, to say the least. Now, I am a straight male, I'm a fully straight male, but I do stand in solidarity with the LGBTQ community. And what I mean by that is, I'm not necessarily going to be at the rallies or on the front line with the megaphone, but I do believe that everyone should be able to marry whoever they want. As long as it's an adult, they should be able to marry regardless of gender or sex. It does not matter. These things, in my opinion, are literally not even worth discussing. But apparently, a lot of people disagree because, as you can see right here, the Supreme Court has been formally asked to overturn landmark same-sex marriage ruling. Kim Davis, a former clerk who refused gay couples, brought the appeal. So I'm assuming that this right here is Kim Davis. Now, I'm not going to make any ad hominem attacks. I'll leave that to you to do in the comments. But what I will say is that she is not the only one. She is most certainly not the only one who is against gay marriage. And it does not make sense to me. I never understood why people don't support gay marriage. It literally does not affect anything. It doesn't affect anything at all. Because think about it. Even if you're against the LGBTQ community, let's just play devil's advocate for a second. Even if you are against that for your own moral reasons, whatever it is, you won't know if they're married or not. If you see gay couples walking down the street, you don't know if they're married, if they're dating, or even if they're just friends. You don't know. So what difference does it make? It does no harm to you whatsoever. At all. No harm. So I don't understand what the deal is when it comes to overturning the same-sex marriage ruling. And honestly, there are a lot of things that I don't really understand in terms of the direction America seems to be going in, such as, for example, the Roe versus Wade Act. I think that's what it's called. Basically, overturning the federal ruling that abortion is legal in all states. I think that's how it worked. All I know is that I think in around 2022, give or take, in the state of Texas, they made abortion illegal, which to me was so mind-blowing at the time, especially as someone who, if I'm being honest with you, had had at least one pregnancy scare at around 20 years old. At 20 years old, I was not prepared to be a father, neither mentally nor financially. So you can only imagine how relieved I felt knowing that that was an option at the time back in 2020. But apparently a lot of people disagreed that that should be an option because, again, they made it illegal. It seems like America is very intent on going backwards. America is literally the opposite of progressive. When you think about the term progressive, it implies you emphasize progress. You prioritize progress above all. But rest assured that there are a lot of people who think like her behind closed doors, and those are really the people you have to watch out for. Now, also, it's interesting that she refused gay couples as a clerk. Now, I don't know what the nature of her profession was, what a clerk really does, but what I do know is that I'm pretty sure that is illegal. If I'm not mistaken, right? I'm pretty sure that's illegal. You can't just not serve people in whatever service you are doing because they have a different sexual preference than you. That'd be no different than her refusing to service me because I'm black. I'm pretty sure that's illegal. I don't know. Again, I'm uninformed, but common sense tells me that that is not allowed in any developed nation. But as you're about to see as this video goes on, America is rapidly devolving into an undeveloped nation, at least mentally and morally. That said, on to this next post. Trump demands homeless people move out of Washington, D.C. immediately. Trump demands homeless people move. Move where? Look, I think I even mentioned this in a video before, but a lot of cities in the US actually send their homeless people to places like LA and San Francisco, believe it or not. This is actually a thing that happens. And people wonder why places like LA and San Francisco have such high homelessness rates. Of course, part of that is the high cost of living in those places. It's also due to the weather drawing homeless people on their own accord. But it's also the case that cities bus their homeless people to those places. And then those same places are the ones who will say LA is a cesspool of needles and a dystopian homelessness sanctuary, whatever you want to call it. It's so crazy, the double standard that you see with a lot of these American cities. But this right here is the president of the US demanding that homeless people move out of the capital immediately. Again, where? Now, the DC area is on par with the LA area in terms of cost of living. In fact, some parts might even be ahead in terms of cost of living. So again, the issue is that people can't afford housing and there aren't enough alternative options because people like Trump don't want to provide them. So again, there's a major double standard here. And it seems like a lot of people in the US, at least from what I've seen throughout the years, they simply accept homelessness as a fact of life. That's just part of the backdrop of America. And it wasn't until I went to Europe in 2023, I went to Spain in particular, that I realized that homelessness is actually not common. I think in my 2 weeks in Spain, I saw a total of 2 or 3 homeless people. And they were the same 2 or 3 homeless people that I would see on the same routes that I would go on. In the US, you will see 2 to 3 homeless people every 15 minutes, depending on where you live. Especially in a place like LA, you're not going to be able to travel more than 5 kilometers without seeing a homeless person. It doesn't matter where you are. You're just not going to be able to do that. Much less people who are stealth homeless. In other words, people living in their cars or maybe bouncing around from friend to friend or relative to relative, sleeping on couches and floors, things of that nature. This doesn't make sense. Honestly, homeless people should demand Trump move out of Washington, D.C. The American people should demand that Trump move out of Washington, D.C. because clearly this man is not fit to be the president of the U.S. In fact, based on how he got absolutely washed in that European Union trade deal, it seems like he's not really fit to be the leader of anything. Business, politics, in any facet of life. He just doesn't seem like someone who is a competent leader. And for as much as you might agree with me saying that, apparently 47% of Republicans disagree because 47% of Republicans would still vote for Trump even if implicated in Epstein's crimes, survey found. Now, here's the thing. Again, I'm uninformed, but it's my understanding based on the headlines I've read and the very, very minimal research I've done thus far that Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted sex offender and Trump is closely associated with him. And in fact, I think they were both tied to a specific sexual offense or multiple sexual offenses. Again, I'm relying on you to kind of fill in those gaps for me because that's really all I know. That's the extent of my awareness of this. But this right here isn't even about the facts. This is about the hypothetical, which is that if Trump was implicated in Epstein's crimes, so I'm assuming that means he is found to be at least partially culpable for some of those sexual offenses, officially, on an official level, 47% of Republicans would still vote for him. 47% of Republicans would still vote for him. And these are the same people who are super, super pro-police and pro-prison and anti-prison reform, etc., etc. Of course, I'm generalizing here, but what else can I really do when you have statistics like this? And we'll get more into statistics here in a second, but this does not make sense to me. What this tells me is that a decent portion of the American populace doesn't actually care about making America a better place. They care about being right, or at least appearing right, which is interesting because this would make them objectively wrong. But they don't care about actually being right or wrong. They just want to appear right or wrong because they operate entirely based on emotion rather than logic and fact. And this is the primary reason why America is devolving in the way it is. This is the primary reason why you see people like Kim Davis here who want to overturn something that has absolutely nothing to do with them at all. If Americans simply learned to mind their business in affairs that don't matter, that aren't relevant to them, but didn't mind their business, or rather did mind their business because this is everyone's business, in affairs that do matter, that are relevant to them and the overall well-being of the American populace, and by extension, most of the rest of the world. Because let's face it, the rest of the world is all intertwined. We're all interconnected. America would be in a much better spot. But what I just described, for as logical as it sounds, and for as much as you actually see this in practice in many European nations, and even some Asian nations, it seems to be a bit overly optimistic and idealistic when you talk about the American populace. Because, again, they don't care about facts, they don't care about statistics. Now, speaking of statistics, we have another headline here. Donald Trump fires the person behind the jobs numbers after they're revised down. So, I think I saw something about this a couple of weeks ago where first I saw a headline that said that the official statistics show that there were fewer jobs for Americans, that the jobs available were declining overall. And then I think a couple of days later, I saw a headline similar to this, that the jobs numbers person had been fired. What does this tell you? This tells you that Trump does not want the truth to be exposed. And I'm actually going to go into the comments here because I saw a comment that really perfectly encapsulated Trump's whole entire presidency and his administration and everything it represents, which is truth is treason in the empire of lies. Never has a truer statement been made in regards to Trump's presidency because, again, Trump's whole entire presidency, his election campaign, the actual presidency itself, has been purely predicated on marketing. That's the one thing I will give Trump, is that he's incredible at marketing, especially to people who don't have the capacity to engage in independent thought. People who don't maybe have the intellectual bandwidth to think for themselves. He's very good at marketing to those kinds of people by eliciting negative emotions and catering to natural confirmation biases that all humans have. But again, even when it comes to confirmation bias, humans should still develop the capacity to think for themselves. But clearly, it seems like a lot of Americans have not developed that capacity, and it clearly shows.